The moment my sister's minivan disappeared around the corner, everything I believed about my family crumbled into dust. I was standing in the entryway of Meredith's suburban home, watching through the window as she and her husband Derek headed toward the airport. 7 days in Hawaii, sun, sand, and tropical drinks while I house-sat and looked after my niece. I turned around with a warm smile, ready to suggest we order pizza and have a movie marathon. Maybe we could build a blanket fort in the living room like we used to. But Willow wasn't reaching for her communication device. She wasn't tapping away at the specialized tablet that had become her voice for the past 6 years. She was standing completely still, staring at me with an expression I had never witnessed in her 9 years of existence. And then my niece, the child everyone believed had lost her ability to speak due to a tragic medical condition, the little girl who hadn't uttered a single word since she was a toddler, opened her mouth. "Aunt Harper, please don't eat the brownies Mom left in the kitchen. She put something dangerous in them." Her voice was crystal clear, melodic even, like she had been practicing in secret her entire life. Every drop of blood in my body turned to ice. I need to rewind about 8 hours because you have to understand how I arrived at this moment. How I found myself standing in my sister's pristine home discovering that everything I accepted as truth about my family was an elaborate deception. My name is Harper Collins. I just turned 34. I work as a financial analyst at a consulting firm in Cleveland, Ohio. Thrilling career choice, I know. While other people fantasize about adventure and romance, I get genuinely excited about quarterly reports and investment portfolios. My therapist suggests I use numbers to create order in a chaotic world. My therapist is absolutely correct. That Saturday morning began like any other. Weekend coffee, quiet condo, jazz playing softly from my speakers. I was actually enjoying the solitude when my phone buzzed. Meredith, my older sister. We were 4 years apart in age, but sometimes the gap felt like an ocean. Her voice was syrupy sweet, which should have triggered every alarm bell in my head. Meredith only deployed that particular tone when she needed something. "Harper, darling, I desperately need your help with something." Turned out she and Derek had won a luxury vacation package through his company. 7 days in Maui, departing that very afternoon. They needed someone to stay at the house and look after Willow. "Of course," I said immediately, because that was always my response to Meredith. I would love some quality time with her. And I genuinely meant it. I adored my niece deeply. Yes, communicating through her tablet was sometimes challenging, but there was something extraordinary about Willow. She had these enormous, observant eyes that seemed to capture every detail around her. When I read stories to her, she would nestle against me, and I could feel the tension leave her small body. My voice seemed to be her sanctuary. You see, Willow was born with a devastating condition. At least that's what Meredith always explained to everyone. Something neurological that destroyed her capacity for speech. The specialists identified it when she was around 3 years old. Meredith claimed nothing could reverse it. I never questioned the story, why would I? She was my older sister. Mothers understand their children better than anyone. Besides, I had been living in Boston during Willow's early years. An incredible job offer I simply couldn't refuse. I would fly home for major holidays, maybe an occasional long weekend. By the time Willow reached 3, she was already silent, and Meredith had already constructed the entire narrative. I relocated back to Ohio 3 years ago, when our father got diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. The progressive kind that steals pieces of a person day by day. I wanted to be nearby, wanted to contribute to his care. During those difficult months, I started spending significant time with Willow. Reading to her, gifting her journals and sketchbooks, simply being present. Even without words, we built something genuine and beautiful. Our mother, Eleanor, had passed away 6 years before Dad, an unexpected stroke. She was the vibrant, artistic type, the kind of woman who painted murals in children's hospitals and taught Sunday school. After she was gone, it felt like our family lost its warmth. When Dad finally passed 11 months ago, he left behind a substantial trust. Approximately $1.8 million. His entire career savings, military pension, life insurance payouts, everything combined. The terms were explicit. Both Meredith and I were required to authorize any major disbursements. Dad was thoughtful that way. He also designated me as the beneficiary of his investment portfolio since Meredith had already received significant financial support over the years. I considered it balanced. Now I suspect Dad sensed something I completely missed. Anyway, returning to that Saturday morning, I drove to Meredith's house around 1 in the afternoon. Beautiful property, manicured landscaping. The kind of residence that looks straight out of an architectural digest. Meredith welcomed me at the door with an embrace which was peculiar. My sister was not physically affectionate by nature. "You're absolutely wonderful for doing this, Harper. Truly wonderful." She appeared flawless as always. Salon fresh highlights, professional manicure, coordinated luggage positioned by the entrance. Derek was loading suitcases into their vehicle. He barely acknowledged me. Just a brief nod, a muttered greeting. He seemed anxious, perspiring slightly despite the mild weather. But Derek was always somewhat nervous around me. I attributed it to his naturally jittery personality. Meredith guided me through the house as if I had never visited before. "Here's where the cleaning supplies are stored. Here's Willow's medication schedule. Here's how the security system operates." And then she opened the refrigerator and retrieved a plastic container with a clear lid. "I baked these specially for you," she said, pressing the container into my hands with unnecessary force. "Double chocolate brownies. Your favorite since childhood. You've seemed so stressed lately, Harper. You need to treat yourself." Something about her delivery felt rehearsed, too eager. But I smiled and expressed gratitude because that was my established pattern with Meredith. I smiled. I thanked her. I never challenged her. She had always positioned herself as the one with all the solutions, even when I never requested advice. When I went through a painful divorce at 28, Meredith's prescription was aromatherapy, meditation apps, and a complete kitchen renovation. "Rebuild your space, rebuild your soul," she proclaimed. I still get anxious around essential oil diffusers. A car horn sounded from the driveway. Meredith embraced me again. 2 hugs in one encounter was definitely suspicious. Then she hurried out the door. Derek followed wordlessly. I observed them climb into the vehicle, watched it reverse down the driveway and disappear down the street. Then I secured the front door, turned around, and discovered Willow standing there observing me like she was about to deliver catastrophic news. "Aunt Harper, please don't eat the brownies Mom left in the kitchen. She put something dangerous in them." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't process what was happening. The container was still clutched in my hands, suddenly feeling like it contained explosives. My niece, who I genuinely believed had lost her ability to speak due to a medical tragedy, had just spoken to me in a perfectly clear voice. And she was cautioning me that my own sister was attempting to harm me. I placed the container on the kitchen island like it might detonate. My hands were trembling so violently I nearly dropped it. Then I turned back to Willow and lowered myself to her height. "Willow," I whispered, You can actually talk?" She nodded solemnly. Her eyes were enormous, frightened. But there was also something resilient in them. Something courageous. "I always could, Aunt Harper. Mommy forced me to stop." The kitchen walls seemed to close in around me. I steadied myself against the counter. "What exactly do you mean, forced you to stop?" And that's when my 9-year-old niece told me a story that demolished everything I understood about my family. Willow had never been unable to speak. She never suffered from a neurological condition. That was complete fabrication. A lie my sister had been perpetuating for 6 years. Until she was 3, Willow talked like any developing toddler. She formed her first words, expanded her vocabulary daily, hummed songs, asked countless questions, whispered, "I love you," every bedtime. Then one ordinary afternoon, everything transformed. Willow was playing in her bedroom upstairs. She grew thirsty and quietly descended to the kitchen for some apple juice. Mommy was at the table talking on her phone. She didn't notice the small child standing in the hallway. Willow heard fragments of conversation. Most of it was incomprehensible to her young mind, but certain phrases registered. Aunt Harper, an accident, an insurance payout, and when Dad finally goes and she has no idea how stupid she is. Willow was only 3 years old. She didn't understand what insurance payout meant, but she recognized Aunt Harper. And she understood the cold, contemptuous way her mommy pronounced stupid. The following morning, innocent and puzzled, Willow asked her mother, "Mommy, what does accident mean?" Meredith's expression transformed into something terrifying. She seized Willow's wrists with bruising force and crouched until their faces were inches apart. "Listen to me very carefully," she hissed. "If you ever speak again to anybody about anything, something terrible will happen to Aunt Harper. Your voice is a weapon. Every single word you say wounds her. If you truly love your auntie, you will never make another sound. Do you understand me?" Willow loved me completely. I was the aunt who brought her illustrated storybooks, who made up voices for every character, who smiled at her like she was the most precious person in existence. So Willow stopped talking. She was 3 years old. She made a decision to surrender her voice to protect me. I collapsed onto Meredith's kitchen floor, tears cascading down my face as this child explained the sacrifice she had made. 6 years of silence. 6 years of terror, believing that every word she spoke might harm the person she cherished most. And Meredith, my sister, the seemingly devoted mother, had weaponized that fear. She brought Willow to specialists, performed the role of worried parent, collected a selective mutism diagnosis. But she told family members something different. Neurological present from birth. Irreversible. She ensured no one examined the actual medical documentation. I was living in Boston, visiting a handful of times per year. I had zero reason to doubt my own sister regarding her own child. I noticed a framed certificate on the living room wall. Outstanding parent volunteer from Willow's elementary school last spring. Everyone praised Meredith's patience, her unwavering commitment to her special needs daughter. I suddenly wanted to shatter that frame into 1,000 pieces. "Sweetheart, what else do you know?" I asked gently. "What else have you witnessed?" It turned out that remaining silent rendered Willow essentially invisible. Adults completely forgot she was present. They conversed freely around her, assuming she couldn't comprehend or couldn't communicate what she heard even if she did. Willow observed everything. She observed her mother practicing my signature repeatedly on notebook paper until it appeared nearly authentic. She heard phone conversations about the trust fund and transferring assets before Harper catches on. She witnessed her father becoming increasingly subservient to her mother, agreeing to everything, challenging nothing. She observed her mother performing for neighbors, school administrators, medical professionals. The perfect mask of a sacrificing parent devoted to her disabled daughter. And 4 nights ago, Willow heard something that made her realize she couldn't maintain her silence any longer. She had crept to the top of the staircase as she had done hundreds of times before. Her parents were in the kitchen strategizing. "The brownies contain enough to make her seriously ill," Meredith explained. "Not fatal, just severe symptoms. Vomiting, confusion, extreme fatigue. She'll be hospitalized for several days minimum." "What about Willow while we're traveling?" Derek asked. "Mrs. Thompson next door will take her." I already explained that Harper has medical episodes sometimes. She was completely sympathetic. "And while Harper's incapacitated in the hospital, we fly to Phoenix. There's an attorney there who has never met her. I have all the forged documentation prepared. We transfer the entire trust into my name. By the time Harper recovers enough to understand what happened, it's irreversible. She'll never be able to prove anything. No vacation, no luxury Hawaiian resort. Just a scheme to poison me, forge my signature, and steal nearly $2 million. My own sister." I pulled Willow into my arms and held her fiercely. This brave, remarkable child. She carried this burden for 6 years. She watched her mother deceive everyone. And when it genuinely mattered, she found the strength to break her silence. "You rescued me," I whispered into her hair. "You understand that, right? You rescued my life." She hugged me back. Small arms wrapped tightly around my neck. "I couldn't let Mommy hurt you, Auntie, not anymore." I looked over at the container sitting on the kitchen island. Innocent-looking clear lid. Homemade brownies from my loving sister. Evidence. My tears ceased. Something cold and focused settled in my chest. Meredith thought she had 7 days to steal everything. She thought I would be lying in a hospital bed too incapacitated to stop her. She was devastatingly wrong. The first call I made was to Natalie Brennan. Natalie and I met during graduate school. She pursued medicine while I pursued finance. Different trajectories, but we remained close through everything. She was the kind of friend who appeared with homemade soup during illness and told you uncomfortable truths when necessary. I trusted her absolutely, she answered immediately. "Harper, what's going on?" "Natalie, I need you to come to Meredith's house right now. Something happened and I can't explain it over the phone. Please just come." Something in my voice must have alarmed her. She didn't request details. I'm leaving now. 45 minutes later, she was at the front door, still wearing her hospital badge, hair pulled back messily. She took one look at my expression and embraced me. "Tell me everything." So I did, every detail. The brownies, the scheme, and Willow, sweet silent Willow, who had spoken for the first time in 6 years to warn me. When I finished, Natalie was silent for a long moment. Then she looked over at Willow, who was sitting on the sofa watching us with those enormous, serious eyes. Natalie walked over and knelt before her. "You're the most courageous child I've ever encountered," she said softly. "You know that?" Willow almost smiled. Natalie stood up all business now. Okay, first priority, those brownies need laboratory analysis. I know someone in the hospital toxicology department. She can run an emergency analysis tonight. If there's anything harmful in there, we'll have confirmation by morning. She retrieved latex gloves from her medical bag and carefully transferred a sample of the brownies into a sterile container. What kind of person poisons baked goods? She muttered. I always sensed something was off about Meredith. Remember when she told you that outfit made you look frumpy at your own birthday party? That wasn't sisterly advice, that was psychological manipulation disguised as concern. I almost laughed. Almost. Now, Natalie continued, what additional evidence exists? There must be more documentation if she's been orchestrating this scheme. I looked at Willow. Sweetheart, you mentioned knowing where Mommy keeps important papers. She nodded and climbed off the sofa. In Daddy's office, there's a filing cabinet with a combination lock. I know the numbers. How do you know the combination? I watched Mommy open it. Many times, she never noticed me watching. A small, sad pause. Nobody ever notices the quiet kid. She led us to Derek's home office. A neat, carefully organized room with dark wood furniture and leather chairs. There was a large desk with a computer, bookshelves lined with business titles, and one filing cabinet with a combination lock. 4721, Willow said. April 7th, 2021. The day they closed on this house. Of course, Meredith would use something significant. Made her feel clever. I entered the combination. The cabinet clicked open. What we discovered inside made my stomach revolt. First, bank authorization forms bearing my signature. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close, remarkably close. But I could identify the differences immediately. The angle on my capital H was wrong. Anyone familiar with my handwriting would notice. Meredith had practiced extensively, but she wasn't perfect. Second, bank statements from the trust account. 11 months of activity, withdrawal after withdrawal. Always in amounts under $10,000, just below the threshold that would trigger mandatory reporting to federal authorities. Meredith had researched thoroughly. The total, approximately $230,000 gone. Stolen by my own sister while I trusted her completely. Third, printed emails between Meredith and an attorney in Phoenix named Douglas Fletcher. They discussed emergency transfer of trust assets and referenced my diminished mental capacity and inability to manage finances. The meeting was scheduled for day 5 of the vacation. Fourth, and this one nearly destroyed me, a folder labeled Harper Documentation. Inside were pages of notes in Meredith's handwriting. Dated entries describing my erratic behavior, my depressive episodes, my paranoid accusations. Complete fabrications, all of it. She was constructing a paper trail, preparing to portray me as mentally incompetent in case I ever challenged the fraud. My own sister was planning to have me declared unstable. To destroy my credibility, to take everything and leave me with nothing. Not even my reputation. Natalie photographed every single document. Every page, every date. This is calculated fraud, she said grimly. This isn't impulsive. She's been planning this for over a year. I was already organizing the information mentally, analyst brain activating. Dates, patterns, the amounts withdrawn each month, the signatures that didn't quite match. Numbers don't lie. And these numbers told a very clear story. Then Natalie's phone buzzed. Her contact at the hospital laboratory had expedited the brownie analysis. The results: a concentrated combination of a powerful emetic compound and a sedative substance. Not lethal, but absolutely incapacitating. Anyone who consumed them would be violently ill and barely conscious for 48 to 72 hours. Hospital level sick, exactly like Willow said. Meredith wasn't attempting to kill me. She was too calculated for that. She just needed me incapacitated long enough to steal everything. I thought about my emergency savings account. $11,000 secured in a separate institution that nobody knew about. A financial advisor told me years ago to always maintain escape funds. I had followed that guidance quietly, never mentioning it to family. Now that money was going to fund my fight. Sometimes boring financial planning saves your life. There was one more call to make, Marcus Williams. We met at a professional conference 5 years ago. He was an attorney who specialized in financial crimes and fraud cases. I called him, explained everything. When I finished, there was a long silence. Harper, he finally said. This is fraud, forgery, attempted poisoning, and what your sister did to that child. Coercive control, psychological abuse. That's serious, extremely serious. What do I do? You let me handle the legal side. I'll coordinate with local police and reach out to the FBI. This crosses state lines, which makes it federal. We'll contact the Phoenix lawyer, too. He might be an unwitting participant, or he might be involved. Either way, we find out. And Meredith? She can't know you're aware. If she gets spooked, she could disappear with whatever money she has access to. You need to make her believe her plan is working perfectly. I looked at the brownie container, still sitting on the kitchen island. I had to pretend I ate them, pretend I was sick. Pretend I was helpless and incapacitated while my sister flew to Phoenix to rob me? Several days of acting, the performance of my lifetime. I can do that, I said, and I meant it. The following days became an elaborate theatrical production. I sent carefully crafted text messages to Meredith, making my voice sound weak, shaky, desperate. Meredith, something's terribly wrong. I've been so sick all night. Vomiting, dizzy. I can barely stand. I think I need to go to the emergency room. Willow is okay. Mrs. Thompson can take her if I have to go to the ER. I'm so sorry to ruin your vacation. I'll figure it out. Her response arrived 2 hours later. Not a phone call. Not a frantic voicemail demanding to know which hospital. Not a worried message asking to speak to her daughter. A text. Oh no, feel better soon. Don't worry about Willow. Mrs. T is great with kids. Rest up and take care of yourself. See you in a few days. I stared at that exclamation point for a long time. My sister might have poisoned me. She was actively planning to steal nearly $2 million from me. And her response was generic well wishes and excessive punctuation. I've seen people put more effort into responding to telemarketers. Natalie's husband, who worked in cybersecurity, helped us track their digital footprint. Turned out Derek wasn't as careful as Meredith. His social media still had location services enabled. He posted a photograph at a restaurant 2 days after they supposedly left for Hawaii. Geotagged to Phoenix, Arizona, no beach. No tropical resort, no Hawaiian sunset. They were exactly where Willow said they would be. Meanwhile, Marcus arranged for a child advocacy specialist to take Willow's statement. It had to be done properly. Videotaped with a child psychologist present, following all legal protocols for minor witnesses. Willow was nervous. She sat in a chair that dwarfed her small frame, feet dangling above the floor. But when the questions started, she sat up straight. She used her voice, still new, still unfamiliar after 6 years of silence, and told them everything. What she heard when she was 3, the threats, the fear, the decision to stop speaking, the years of watching and listening, the night she overheard the plan about the brownies. When it was over, she looked at me through the observation window. That's the most I've talked since I was little, she said. My voice feels tired, but it feels good. Like I've been holding my breath underwater for years. And I finally came up for air. The operation was scheduled for day 5. Phoenix, Arizona, 10:30 in the morning. Douglas Fletcher's law office, 5th floor of a professional building downtown. I wasn't there in person. Marcus arranged a secure video feed so I could watch from Meredith's living room. Willow sat beside me holding my hand. Natalie was on my other side. We watched the lobby camera as Meredith and Derek walked through the front entrance. Meredith looked impeccable. Professional dress, understated jewelry, concerned expression carefully arranged on her face. She was carrying a leather portfolio, the same one from Derek's office, I realized. Full of forged documents and stolen dreams. Derek looked like he was going to collapse. Sweating through his dress shirt, eyes darting around the lobby. He knew something was wrong with this entire scheme. He had always known. But he was too weak, too intimidated by his wife to stop it. They approached the receptionist, smiled, provided their names. The receptionist smiled back and led them down a hallway toward the conference room. 3 people were waiting inside. Meredith walked in first, confident, ready to finalize the biggest theft of her life. Douglas Fletcher sat at the head of the table. Gray-haired, distinguished. He didn't smile when she entered. Didn't stand to shake her hand. 2 other individuals sat at the table. A man and a woman. Plain clothes, professional demeanor. Meredith hesitated in the doorway. I thought this was a private meeting, she said. That syrupy sweet voice again? The one she deployed when she sensed something amiss. Fletcher's response was flat. Mrs. Patterson, please have a seat. These are Special Agents Morrison and Chen. They have some questions about the documentation you've submitted. Through the video feed, I watched my sister's face. The flicker of confusion, the rapid calculation behind her eyes. The decision to brazen it out. She sat down, crossed her legs, folded her hands on the table. Of course, whatever I can help with. Is there some problem with the paperwork? Agent Morrison was calm, almost friendly. She asked Meredith to confirm her identity, her relationship to me, her role as co-trustee of our father's estate. Meredith confirmed everything, smooth. confident. She still believed she could talk her way out. Then Morrison placed 2 documents on the table side by side. On the left, my signature from the forged authorization forms. On the right, my real signature from verified bank records. Mrs. Patterson, can you explain why these signatures don't match? For just a second, barely a heartbeat, I saw panic flash across Meredith's face. Then the mask slammed back into place. My sister has very inconsistent handwriting. She's always been that way. And frankly, she's not well mentally. I have documentation about her instability. I can show you. Agent Chen cut her off. We've reviewed your documentation. The notes about your sister's supposed mental health issues. He paused. Interesting thing. Her employer describes her as one of the most meticulous analysts they've ever worked with. Her physician confirms she's in excellent mental and physical health. Multiple colleagues provided statements calling her exceptionally stable and trustworthy. The mask was cracking. They don't see her like I do. Family knows the truth. Mrs. Patterson. Morrison's voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath. We have bank records showing over $200,000 in unauthorized withdrawals over 11 months. We have email correspondence with this office discussing emergency trust transfers. We have forensic analysis of your sister's signatures proving forgery. She placed another document on the table. And we have laboratory results from the brownies you prepared. A concentrated combination of emetic compounds and sedatives. Enough to hospitalize someone for days. Derek made a small sound like a wounded animal. Meredith was frozen. The syrupy expression was gone. What remained was something cold and cornered. And then Morrison pulled out a tablet. There's one more piece of evidence we'd like you to hear. She pressed play. A child's voice filled the conference room. Clear, steady, unmistakable Willow. My mommy told me when I was 3 that if I ever talked again, something bad would happen to Aunt Harper. She said my voice was dangerous, that every word would hurt her. So I stopped talking for 6 years to protect my aunt. The recording continued, Willow describing what she overheard. The phone call when she was 3, the night before the vacation. Every detail delivered in that careful, serious voice. I couldn't let Mommy hurt Auntie Harper. She's the only one who ever really saw me. Even when I couldn't talk, she listened. The recording ended. Silence. Meredith stared at the tablet like it had grown teeth and bitten her. She can't. She's mute. She's been mute since she was 3 years old. She can't talk. This is fabricated. You fabricated? Mrs. Patterson. Agent Morrison's voice was quiet now, almost gentle. The gentleness made it worse. You just confirmed that you believed your daughter couldn't speak. But according to medical records, the real ones, not what you told your family, Willow was diagnosed with selective mutism, a psychological condition often caused by trauma or fear. She let that sink in. Your daughter stopped speaking because you terrorized her into silence. For 6 years, that's child psychological abuse. Added to fraud, forgery, and attempted poisoning. Meredith's face twisted. The mask didn't just crack. It shattered completely. What emerged was ugly raw. The real Meredith finally visible. She was supposed to stay quiet. She was never supposed to— Meredith. Derek's voice shaking. Stop talking. Just stop. He turned to the agents. I want an attorney. A separate attorney. I'll cooperate. I'll tell you everything. She planned all of it. The signatures, the transfers, the brownies. I was scared of her. I'll testify, whatever you need. Meredith turned on him with fury that made even the agents tense. You pathetic coward, after everything I did for us? Mrs. Patterson. Agent Chen stood. You're under arrest. Please stand and place your hands behind your back. The handcuffs clicked around her wrists. She was still talking, still trying to explain, to justify, to manipulate. But there was no one left to manipulate. Everyone in that room had seen the evidence. Everyone had heard her own daughter's testimony. She was led out of the conference room, out of the building, into a waiting vehicle. I watched through the video feed as my sister, the golden child, the perfect mother, the woman who had terrorized a 3-year-old into silence and tried to poison her own sister, disappeared into the back of that vehicle. I felt Willow squeeze my hand. I looked down at her. It's over, she whispered. It's over. Natalie let out a long breath. Well, I suppose they'll want that parent volunteer certificate back. Think we should mail it to her at her new address? I almost laughed. Almost. Justice was coming. But there was one more thing I needed to do. 3 weeks later, County Family Court. The courtroom was small, functional. Not the dramatic space you see in television shows. Just a room with fluorescent lighting and uncomfortable chairs, and a judge's bench that had witnessed 1,000 shattered families. But today something was being restored. I sat at the front table in my best professional attire. Willow sat beside me. She had selected her own outfit that morning. A blue dress with yellow flowers, her favorite colors. She had brushed her own hair. She was nervous, I could tell. Her foot kept bouncing under the table. But she wasn't silent anymore. The judge reviewed the case file. Meredith's arrest, the fraud charges, the forgery, the attempted poisoning, the 6 years of psychological abuse inflicted on a child. Derek had surrendered his parental rights in exchange for cooperation with prosecutors. He had known about everything. He had done nothing to stop it. He didn't deserve to be Willow's father, and somewhere in that weak, cowardly heart of his, he knew it. The judge looked up from the papers. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes behind reading glasses. "I've reviewed the emergency custody petition," she said. "Given the circumstances, the arrest of the mother, the cooperation of the father, and the extensive documentation of psychological abuse, I'm prepared to rule." She turned to look at Willow directly, not at me. At her. "Young lady, I understand you've recently started speaking again after many years of silence." "That took tremendous courage," Willow nodded. She was gripping my hand so tight I was losing circulation. "I'd like to ask you directly, in your own words. Where would you like to live?" Willow looked at me, then at the judge, then back at me. And then she stood up. 9 years old, 4 feet tall. Wearing a blue flowered dress and more bravery than most adults ever manage. "I want to live with my Aunt Harper," she said. Her voice was clear, strong. A voice she had sacrificed for 6 years to protect someone she loved. She's the only one who ever really saw me. Even when I couldn't talk, she listened. She read me stories, she sat with me. She never made me feel like something was wrong with me. She paused, then added, "Also, she makes really good waffles." Quiet laughter rippled through the courtroom. Even the judge smiled. She signed the papers. Emergency custody granted to Harper Collins. Walking out of the courthouse, I couldn't stop looking at Willow. She was chattering away about the courtroom, about what she wanted for lunch, about a squirrel she spotted on the courthouse lawn, about whether we could get a cat someday. 6 years of silence, now she couldn't stop talking. And I wouldn't have it any other way. That evening, we had dinner in my condo, our condo now. I had already started converting the guest room into Willow's bedroom. Pale blue walls, her choice, bookshelves everywhere. A cozy reading corner by the window with fairy lights. "Aunt Harper?" she asked through a mouthful of pasta. "Yeah, sweetheart? Can I tell you about ocean creatures?" I smiled. "Absolutely." What followed was a 30-minute lecture on every marine animal Willow had ever read about, complete with detailed analysis of which ones were most misunderstood. Apparently, sharks have terrible public relations because of movies, and octopuses are actually geniuses who could probably solve puzzles better than most adults. The real winner, according to Willow, would be the mantis shrimp. Basically a tiny boxer with superpowers, she explained seriously. I nodded along to all of it. I didn't need to understand marine biology. I just needed to listen. Willow started therapy the following week. A specialist in childhood trauma. The sessions were difficult sometimes. 6 years of fear and silence don't disappear overnight. There were hard days when she got quiet again, when the old terror crept back in, but there were more good days. Days when she laughed out loud. Days when she sang along to the radio. Days when she came home from school bursting with stories about new friends who had never known her as the silent girl. Just as Willow Meredith faced multiple felony charges. The evidence was overwhelming. She accepted a plea agreement to avoid trial. I didn't attend any of the hearings. I had better things to do. The trust fund was frozen and audited. Most of the stolen money was traced and recovered. I became sole trustee, managing it carefully for our future. Mine and Willow's. Sometimes I think about our father, about the trust structure he created that required both signatures. About how he always seemed slightly wary around Meredith, even when he couldn't articulate why. I think Dad sensed something I completely missed. And even in death, he protected the people who deserved protection. I like to think he would be proud of how things turned out. Last Saturday morning, Willow and I had breakfast on my small balcony. Nothing extravagant, just pancakes and fresh orange juice and early autumn sunshine. Willow was describing a dream she had. Something about a penguin who owned a bakery, a castle constructed entirely of pancakes, and a very polite dragon named Gerald, who apologized every time he accidentally sneezed fire. It made absolutely no sense. It was perfect. I sipped my coffee and listened. really listened. This is what family is supposed to sound like. Not silence, not lies. Not manipulation and fear, just this. A kid rambling about pancake castles. Morning light through the trees. Two people who chose each other, sitting together, talking about nothing and everything. Willow paused mid-story and looked at me. Aunt Harper? Yeah, sweetheart. Thank you for listening. For real listening, even when I couldn't talk. I reached over and squeezed her hand. Always, sweetheart, always. Sometimes the quietest people aren't weak. They're just waiting for someone they trust enough to finally speak. Willow found her voice, and I found my family. Some stories have happy endings. Ours was just beginning.